So today is our annual budget meeting, which is always fun if this is your first day at coming to this church, right? And the simple version, if you don't know what that means, is essentially we're a democratic church, so each year we vote together as members on our budget for the next year. And this sermon is going to talk about the budget some, but don't worry if this is your first time here, because what I'm about to say really isn't about money. It's about values. And so whether you're here in person or you're listening at home or this is your first time, what I'm going to talk about actually is quite a universal. You can apply it in lots of different ways. So we all live with finite resources, right? In our personal lives, the limit is typically what we earn in terms of money, right? The money we earn. And in the case of this church, our money comes from three places. Pledges given by members, which Todd spoke about so well earlier, rentals, and our endowment. And somehow those finite dollars at home or in community have to cover what we want to spend. And more often than not, we make this budget sort of very concrete. It's about electricity and food and things like that. But beneath that level, right, what we spend is a representation of our values. So we could choose to buy groceries or we could choose to eat out, right? They're both food, but they represent different values. And sometimes we have issues at home because our partner has different values than I do. Carrie likes to buy groceries and save money and cook healthy food at home, and I like to eat out and spend money. And, somehow we've got to find a way there, right? And the same is true with organizations like this one. It's always a balancing act. There's always a compromise. So the question we're really asking when we look at this budget, when we hopefully pass the budget, is what do we value? What are we valuing? Does our budget reflect our commitment to social justice, to paying equitable wages, to maintaining this building, to leaving a legacy for the future generations? Because none of us own the church. We are just stewards. It's in our care for a little bit of time, and we're really making it safe for the next generation. We don't know who they are yet. And it can get personal because we all have issues to us that deeply matter. Homelessness, climate change, accessible washrooms, Israel-Palestine. That's not very hot, the last one, right? Nobody has strong feelings there. But, it all involves, when we get moving in the budget, things start to become personal. The music that moves us, the education that's there for our children. And things can get tense here, right? Voices can get raised. This is where we discover whether we are a collection of competing interests or a body that is sharing a common life together. So the question underneath the budget isn't, can we afford this? That's the surface level. The question is, who are we and who do we want to become given this finite group of resources that we have? And it's true on the institutional level as it is at home, right? So balancing a budget at church and any organization really has this added complication, however, of the distance between members with competing values, right? And when people don't actually see themselves as a community that needs other people in the way that we might see that at home, right? I need Carrie. Compromise gets trickier because it's easier to discount the values of other people as being incorrect or not as important as our values. We're the right ones, after all. It's always the perspective. We're the right ones, right? And we really see this relationship of distance and discounting on a national level, right? And on a global level, it's as if sometimes it doesn't even exist at all, right? The values of other nations and what they need does not exist. And so the greater the distance between members, the easier it is to discount. And if we want to avoid that, to avoid the discounting, then perhaps, and also being discounted, right? Then it's in our interest, perhaps, to explore what we can create that engenders a deeper sense of connection. And so this month, we've been exploring what it means to belong, right? What it means to belong. And I've used this church as an example because it's great to study something up close, but we're members of lots of things. We have personal relationships, we're members of other organizations, we're members of society. And learning how to let go of some of our personal desires to be part of a larger experience is what differentiates relationships and organizations and societies that care for one another and ones that don't. So on the individual level, we call this maturity. That's what we call it. If I am so selfish in my personal relationships that they all have to go my way, we call that immaturity. We look at people and we're just like, wow, they really don't, they just haven't grown up, right? And we can see that on a societal level as well. I think this is some of what we're seeing in the United States, right? There is a selfishness that has gripped that culture, and it's wildly immature. And it's having devastating consequences. And for us here, we can sort of look over the border and be like, that's not us. But Canada is not immune, right? We can be very selfish and self-righteous too, especially when it comes to the United States. It doesn't take much, right? Self-righteousness is a masking emotion that lets us feel powerful when we're feeling powerless. And it doesn't serve us, it doesn't serve anybody. But thinking about how we might be more invested in each other does serve us and others. So to look at this, I want to just step back a few weeks and to return to a metaphor that we used in October. We were exploring the grief that we feel in the world, about the world, and the sense of overwhelm that comes with that grief. And one of the issues with grief and overwhelm is that we try to manage it by shutting it down or shutting out the world. But it does not actually deal with the issue or the grief. And so I invited you to almost think of this church like a technology that isn't here to make you feel better, but to help you feel more, to be able to take in more of that. Because when we live in a shut-down way, we're not able to actually engage with what's out there. And we talked about being sea otters. Because sea otters hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift away into the ocean. And I asked you all to raise your hands so that you could see the other hands in here. Hands that were ready to hold you when you were in deep water. And these were your sea otters. Right? Does anybody remember that? Raising their hands? Yeah, exactly. So today, I'm going to push that metaphor a little further. Because sea otters don't just hold hands. They also wrap themselves in kelp. So off the Pacific coast, there are these magnificent kelp forests that grow up from the ocean floor. And the otters wrap themselves in the kelp, which tethers them in place. In fact, like when a mom needs to go foraging, she wraps the pups in the kelp, and then she goes off, and she comes back, and it's all wrapped up, right? And it's the combination of the holding hands and the kelp tethers that keep this raft, that's what they call it, the raft of otters, safe. And so they don't just do it to sleep, but they also ride out storms that way. It's safer for them to be in the water wrapped up and holding hands than it is on land. So Unitarian Universalists have a version of kelp that we wrap ourselves in, and that kelp is the covenant. The covenant. And so in this third sermon on what it means to belong and what it means to be members, I'm going to take a look again at this idea of becoming a covenantal community. We talked about this earlier last month, in October. And for those of you who are new and you don't know what a covenant is, and for those of you who've been here for a while and don't know what a covenant is, you might think about it as a guiding value statement. And that's different than a mission statement, right? A mission statement tells you what we aim to do, and a covenant tells you about the promise of how we're going to do that together. So, for example, our mission is to feed the hungry. Our covenant is that we promise to serve with dignity, humility, and without judgment. That's the difference, right? What we do, how we do it. So at the core of a covenantal community is the promise that we make to each other, a promise of caring, a promise of accountability, a promise of sacrifice, and a promise of commitment. And the covenant is what differentiates a member from a friend or a non-member. It's when you become a member, you sort of level up your level of commitment, and you covenant to the others. Now, 3 weeks ago, we explored what it meant to become companions through communion, right? Kumpanas, those who share bread together, awaken, and we sort of wrestled with this idea of awakening to the truth that we inter-are, that there are no clean edges, despite what our minds can tell us. There are no clean edges between where I end and you begin, right? This is the great awakening of it all. So 3 weeks ago, we ate bread together and we tasted the cosmos. It tasted a lot like bread, if you remember. But in that, we were really trying to taste our connection to each other and to everything that is. And then the following week, we explored what it meant to be crew through remembrance, cum memoria, and those people who share memory together. And it's not the type of remembrance of vacation, right? But it's remembering our mutual responsibility to each other, to be crew, right? And we have different roles and we have different duties, but we enact them in such a way that recognizes our accountability to each other. There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are all crew. We're all in this together. And so today we're gonna take it one more level. I don't know if it's down or up. As I was writing, I was like, is it underneath it? I couldn't really quite figure it out. It doesn't really matter. What does it mean to be a member? Not just a companion, not just crew, but a member. And to do this, I want to go back to where the word comes from and how it became relevant to church. So the word member comes from the Latin membrum, which just means limb or body part, or flesh. And it probably comes to us in the church world because it comes probably from the epistles of Paul, specifically 1 Corinthians, where he said, suppose the foot said, I am not a hand, so I don't belong to the body. By saying this, it cannot stop being part of the body. And suppose the ear says, I'm not an eye, so I don't belong to the body. By saying this, it cannot stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, how could it hear? And if the whole body were an ear, how could it smell? If all the parts were the same, how could there be a body? As it is, there are many parts, but there is only one body. The eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. In fact, just the opposite. And so he's not being poetic, he's being precise. To be a member isn't optional, it's not ornamental, it's essential. When you become a member, it is part of being you're a necessary part of a living being, a living organism that we call a congregation. But it feels like somewhere along the way, we lost some of this understanding and membership became transactional, right? Pay your dues, receive services, show up when it's convenient, leave when it's not. And we turn sort of church into like a business, like Blockbuster Video, and and we turned ourselves into consumers. And I think there's a word to what happened to us, and it's that we've been demembered. We've been demembered. And it's not through anyone's malice. It's not through anyone's failure. But through a culture that teaches us to drift, to float alone, to ask, what do I get? Instead of, who are we becoming? Who are we becoming? The centrifugal force of individualism in our culture has pulled the body apart. And I'm really not referring specifically to UCM. I mean really church in general. I mean society in general. We've become dismembered from our own society. Which again is why I think church is so important. Right? I don't know if people always feel this way, but I think of it almost like a technology that can help us ask, how can we be remembered to each other? How can we be remembered? Can limbs that have been scattered be brought back together? But to do this, we have to really redefine and address what it means to be a member. And in part because I just think that the framework we're using is not working. We treat membership like a contract. I pay X, you deliver Y. If you fail to deliver what I want, I withhold payment. Just playing. This is how the market works, right? And it makes perfect sense for the market. Like if you're buying a car or you're hiring a contractor. Right? Contracts are the right tools for those types of relationships. And here at the church, we do have contracts. We have a contract with our alarm system company. And if they stop working the way we want them to do, we find a new company. Right? But membership was never meant to be defined by the market. Membership was meant to be guided by the covenant. And these are fundamentally different relationships. A contract is based on mutual suspicion, actually, when you kind of get into it, right? That's why we need lawyers and fine print. And it specifies the minimum obligations and the maximum requirements, and it protects each party from each other, and it assumes that the relationship is transactional, and it assumes that our interests compete. A covenant is based on mutual trust. It doesn't specify minimum obligations. It asks about maximum potentials. It isn't a wall that separates, it's a promise that binds us to each other. And it assumes the relationship is transformational. It assumes our destinies are shared. One of these creates customers and vendors, and the other creates members, membrum, limbs of one shared body. And one of the reasons I've been talking about covenant this year is partly because we don't actually really have one. We just don't. It would be good if we're a covenantal community, but we don't actually have one. And I know that because most people can't tell me what it is. And so it is there, but if people can't tell you what it is, it's really like it doesn't exist. Right? You can say it's in the bylaws or whatever, or it's hanging in the back of the room, but if people don't know it, if they're not living it, a covenant is a lived promise. It's not something written on a page, right? So we don't really have a shared promise that tethers us right now while we hold each other's hands. So we're halfway there. And right now, there are people who are drifting. Not because they're bad people, not because people don't care, but because we haven't given people enough to hold on to. We've made membership so vague, so optional, that even people who do want to belong aren't really sure what it means. And so we need structure. We need what the sea otters have. We need kelp. Right? I wore my kelpie stole today for this. Kelp is the covenant. It's the sacred promises that we make to each other about how we will show up, what we'll protect about how we show up for one another. Without kelp, there's nothing to wrap around. Without the structure, there's no raft that can form. And without the raft, there's only drifting. And when we drift, we get scared, and we get accusatory, and we get isolated. So there's a church consultant named Mike Durrell who spent decades studying congregations of every denomination, every size, every region, and what he wanted to know was what makes some churches thrive while others slowly die. And what he found sort of contradicts how we've been treating membership in the age of declining membership at churches, right? And the declining social capital in society as a whole. And he's sort of famous for saying, churches that asked, what's the minimum we can ask so people don't leave, watched people leave anyway. And churches that asked, what's the maximum we can become together, saw people rise to the challenge. Let me say that in another way, just because I think it's really important. Low expectations don't keep people. Low expectations cause people to drift away. High expectations create invested members. So the first approach that it creates what Durrell calls the almost church. Almost alive, almost transformative, almost worth belonging to. The second creates community, where when denominations saw their numbers declining, they got scared, and so they asked for less from their members, but in doing so, it made being a member mean less. And in churches where membership meant sign the book and show up when it's convenient, what happens there is annual giving stagnates, and they decline. And pledge meetings and drives, they sort of become battlegrounds, and people withhold money as leverage, and budget meetings turn into negotiations of the loudest voice in the room. And slowly, year after year, the life drains out of a place. But churches where membership means genuine commitment, where people are asked to serve and show up consistently, something different happens, right? Giving increases. Not because people are guilted into it, but because they're invested, because they feel needed, they matter. And I'm going to use the music team right now as an example. We were talking about trying to build a deeper sense of confidence. And somebody was like, let's show up at 9:45. And somebody else was like, nobody is going to show up 45 minutes before church. 10, 11 people show up 45 minutes. Last week it was an hour before church, right? It's not that they're being asked or expected to do something onerous, right? They're being asked to do something meaningful, and that's the difference. Please come. It's a super fun group, and you get donuts like once a month. Durrell found that congregations with high expectations consistently outperformed congregations with low expectations, not just financially, but in every measurable way: attendance, engagement, satisfaction, retention. I used to say this when I was in seminary. I went to the church in Cambridge there, and they're like, oh, we can't get young people to come. And I was like, I live at a Buddhist temple, and we get up every morning at 5:15 to practice. There are 30 of us who live there. 20 of them are under 30. Every morning, 5:15. If you're not getting young people to come to church, it's because it's not meaningful enough. They didn't actually like that when I said that. But it's true. I mean, we had a bunch of people getting up every morning. That's early. 5:15 is early. I didn't like it. But I did it because I believed that it was going to change my life. Humans don't drift away from things that ask for their best. We drift away from things that are convenient but inconsequential. We drift away from things that don't need us, from things that don't matter. And you know this. You can just think about your own life. Like, what are the things that you've actually stuck with? Things that you've poured yourself into. It doesn't mean that it was easy, right? You didn't stick with things that asked nothing of you. Right? It was the hard things that needed you more. That's what you stuck with. In the church world, but also just in life in general, we think about it as like if we ask too much, people will not want to do it. They will leave. You can't ask for too much of meaningless things. But if you're asking for things that are rewarding and enriching, people will come. But what happens actually is the churches, and I don't mean this place, I mean just in general, we ask for almost nothing. Membership is easy, it's convenient, it's low cost, it's low commitment. Sign the book, come when you want. People leave because there's nothing worth staying for. We thought that by removing the barriers, we were actually making it easier, but what we were doing was we were starving people from meaning. So when I think about the budget, I know, I got back here, right? Yeah, I did, I got back here. There is a surface level question about whether it passes or not, right? It's an important question, but it's actually the surface level question. The deeper question is, who are we becoming with this budget? What are the values that are in the budget? We can ask, what do I get for my pledge? And I pledge here, so what do I get for my pledge? But that's a consumer question. That's a contract question. That's a question that treats church like a vendor and you as a customer. Or we can ask, who are we becoming together? What am I investing in? And I'm investing in you, right? You're investing in me. That's the covenant question. The question that treats the church as a body and you as membrum, necessary, not ornamental, necessary to the body. It's the question that asks, does this decision strengthen the whole body? Does it help us become a community that we need to be? Does it move us towards wisdom? Does it help us give wisdom away to a world that is desperately in need of wisdom? One question dismembers. One question remembers. We're not all going to agree. The eye and the hand don't do the same work. But we won't be asking, what do I get? We'll be asking, what strengthens the body? What helps us become who we're called to be? That's the choice. 2 questions and 2 futures. So which future do we want to choose? And to close the service, I want to sing our final hymn by linking arms. And I've talked to the music team about this. So we're going to link our arms just like otters. You don't have to hold a hand. You can just link arms or, just do something like this. And we're going to sing Break Not the Circle. And we have some people who they struggle to stand. So those of you who can walk, I would love it if you could sort of fill in some of the gaps, because we're going to make a circle, right? It can be a circle that weaves in and out. You don't all have to come and do the thing around the room. But this isn't just symbolic. Yeah, you can come on in. This isn't just symbolic. It isn't just a nice gesture. This is an embodiment of covenant, right? When sea otters form a raft in the storms, 3 elements make it possible. The kelp is the structure, something to hold on to. And today, the kelp is the promise. What do we come together? Not what do I get? And our bodies are the substance. Can we include these 2 right here? Yeah, find a way to include those. Our bodies are the substance. Each otter is essential. Each of you are needed. So when you link arms for a few minutes, and this front row, you might turn around because we're going to project the words right up that way. So you can link arms, but turn the other way. What you're doing is you're saying is, I will not let you drift, and you will not let me drift. Right? You can turn right around if you want. Now there's one final piece here, right? The thing that people don't know about sea otters, and it's what biologists call they are a keystone species, and it's a circle. They keep the same kelp forest safe that keeps them safe by regulating the urchin population, right? Without otters, the urchins, they multiply, and they overgraze the kelp, and they devour it faster than it can grow, and they create what are called urchin barrens. And they're underwater deserts where nothing can live, not the kelp, not crabs, not even fish, right? So otters protect the kelp that they wrap themselves in. This is what membrum means. You are not a name on a roster. You are not a line in the budget. You are an essential organ of a living body. So, Margaret is going to break Not the Circle one time through. Then our music team is going to sing it one time because, you've got your arm's length, so you can't hold the hymnals. So the music team is going to sing the first verse, and then we're all going to sing the first verse again. How does that sound? Okay, let's do this.